Okay, so do you want to introduce yourself? Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Stephanie, and I'm a counselor. I have a master's degree in school and counseling psychology, and I've been practicing as a counselor for about 2.5 years, and I work right now at a nonprofit counseling organization.
Okay, so the theme for our box, our launch box, is, I called it self-discovery. So the idea is trying to find out more about your mental illness, and trying to figure out like what your triggers are, what even helps it, because I think that the more you know about it, the more you know about what makes it better or worse, obviously the easier it is to treat it. There are 3 strategies built inside of this box. There's mood tracking, there's naming emotions, and then there's affirmation statements. So we just wanted to go through those 3 things and talk about what they are, how they can help with anxiety and depression, and then I was going to ask you for some tips and some warnings for each of them.
Yes, I'd love to do that.
Sweet. Okay, so let's start with mood tracking. So mood tracking involves exactly what it sounds like. It's tracking your mood over a series of days. Or time. So this month, I'm kind of challenging subscribers to try for a whole month tracking their mood. So every day you can kind of, have a moment where you stop and think, okay, how have I been feeling this day? Have I been feeling like anxious or depressed or really happy or, really irritable or whatever? And then at the end of the month, you'll have a very visual representation of how your mood fluctuates.
It's just so fantastic for a variety of disorders, and even if you don't have a a mental health disorder, just even stress, like finding triggers for stress and just being more aware of yourself is so positive. And I think one of the reasons why mood tracking is so beneficial is it brings awareness to your emotions, and that's actually really powerful. And a really important foundation for wellness is awareness, and that's one of the first things I do. If someone comes into the office with a mood disorder or anxiety, is I get them to track their moods. So, we talked a bit about this idea of self-discovery, and mood tracking is so important for that. So mood tracking is going to help you to identify patterns in your mood, triggers, and warning signs. So patterns, that's really important, and that's why you like the big picture view, is you can kind of take a step back and see what's my overall pattern. You may notice, I typically have periods of maybe a depressive period following anxiety, which we often see. You may notice, if someone notices that there's hormonal fluctuations, and that's impacting their mood, that's something you can kind of track as well. And then as well, you can see triggers. So, and I'll talk a bit more about tips and how you can, maximize mood tracking to find triggers. But you may notice, when I have final exams, that's a trigger for panic. When I have large family gatherings, like that's a trigger, right? You can kind of see those things. And the great thing about mood tracking is it does help to find warning signs that maybe a crisis might be developing, or maybe you need more support. So, I've had, increasingly depressive days, or, I'm having less and less sleep. And, you can really see, okay, things are maybe kind of taking a bit of a downturn. I might need a bit more support right now. So I think that's one of the benefits of mood tracking. And I think, too, one of the great things about mood tracking is that our memories are not infallible. It's very hard to recall, like, how did I feel each day over the course of a month? And especially if you're in a depressive episode, one of the symptoms of depression is not remembering feeling happy, or not being able to recall ever feeling happy or good. And so this is really great because it actually helps you to look back and have an accurate depiction of how you felt over the past month. And also, if you are seeing a counselor or a psychiatrist or any other healthcare provider, it's such great information to have
for them.
Especially if you are maybe working towards a diagnosis. If that's something you're looking at, it's really great to have that information. So actually, as Sean already kind of said, make sure you evaluate your day from a whole day perspective, right? So if you had a moment or, you know, a few hours of anxiety, definitely mark that, but also reflect on how did you feel before or after that. You know, did you have a neutral mood? Did you have, you know, excitement or happiness or, you know, comfort, whatever the emotion might be that you're labeling? Make sure you include that as well.
Yeah, so it should be a well-rounded sort of depiction of how you were feeling that day.
Exactly. And I think one of the most important things you can do too, and this kind of goes back to the triggers part, if you really want to maximize mood tracking, the great thing about the stickers and the color coding is it provides a quick quantitative view, but the more context you can give to your moods, the better. So contextualize that with qualitative data, like what were you doing that day, who were you spending time with, you know, were there any like events that went on, you know, if you're taking medication, did you take your medication that day, did you exercise that day, how was your sleep? And you know, you can create quick codes for that, like if you took your medication, just put an M that day, whatever it might be, because the more you can contextualize your moods, it's going to help you to kind of have a deeper understanding of you know, what's influencing your mood.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the day planner that the subscribers are going to be receiving has monthly views and then also weekly views, like day by day. So what I'm encouraging people to do is use the monthly one for the stickers to get that very visual representation of like how your mood is, and then use the weekly parts to record sort of like brief notes about what you were doing that day. And then hopefully you can kind of compare and look at, okay, so like when I'm doing these things, this tends to be what my mood is. And then that kind of helps you, like you said, notice triggers and sort of contextualize your emotions more.
Yeah, and I think as well, you know, I was kind of reflecting on another way to use mood charting is actually you can use it, you can record data, but you can also use mood charting to process a bit of what's going on, and you can do that by, you know, as you're reflecting on your day and what your mood was, what you were doing, you can ask yourself what I call experience questions.
Okay.
So what was your experience of that? What were you thinking at the time that you felt that? What were you physically feeling? What was your behavior after? And that actually helps you to you know, record the day, but then also reflect and process on the day, which is so great for wellness. So,
yeah, that's a really good idea too.
Whenever I suggest mood tracking to someone, I always want to be really mindful that, you know, number one, not everything works for everyone. So try it out, but if it doesn't work, that's okay. There's nothing wrong. It just wasn't a good fit for you. I think another important thing is just knowing if it's feeling overwhelming that day, if it's just feeling like another task, or maybe even just drawing attention to your emotions is really too much for you that day. It's okay, set it aside, return to it again later if you're, you know, if you're feeling up to it, but never feel like you have to do this. That's totally fine to take a break. So I think that's important.
For sure.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm including like a paper physical version of this because I like physical versions better, but there are lots of mood tracking apps out there too if you find it easier to go on your phone, because they might send you reminders and do like your own kind of charts and stuff like that. So if you're finding that having the day planner and the stickers and everything is just not working, you can definitely try an app.
Yeah, Dailyo is a really good one. I think it's free, so it's always good. But so I think that's a good one if you want to try something different or want a reminder. That's a really good one. So you know, one thing when you're tracking your mood and maybe start to notice that a crisis is developing. So you know, maybe you're having more depressive days for longer periods of time, you know, maybe some suicidal thoughts, make sure you reach out early and, you know, reach out to whether it's a mental health professional, a family member, a friend, but just making sure that you reach out and get the help that you need is really important. So that's, you know, one thing I always recommend. And, you know, I think another just kind of warning sign, or not warning sign, but another like kind of caveat is, you know, don't diagnose yourself based on mood tracking. So, you know, for example, if you notice you have some successive days of depressive mood, and then you have some successive days of maybe elevated or almost manic mood, don't automatically say, okay, I have bipolar. make sure that if a diagnosis is something that you're seeking, you do that with a mental health professional who's authorized and experienced to actually provide a mental health diagnosis. I think it's very important information, and if you suspect something is going on, get it checked out, but don't do that alone.
Yeah, and I guess like I was saying before, one of my counselors did warn me that if I started mood tracking, it might end up feeling, or kind of tricking me into feeling like I was getting worse. Because once you're, focusing more on your emotions, you're thinking about them more, then you might start noticing that you're experiencing more negative emotions more often than you had thought. The opposite might happen too, where you start realizing, oh, I'm actually not having as many anxious days or depressed days as I thought I was, right? But, it's important to sort of recognize that this is something that might, it's making you more aware of your emotions, so that might have varying effects on different people.
Absolutely, yeah. Sometimes the beginning stages of awareness can be really overwhelming, especially if maybe you are not used to being mindful of your mood states. It can be overwhelming and kind of create emotional overload, so just making sure you're taking time for self-care, looking up ways of coping, positive ways of coping with uncomfortable emotions, I think can be really beneficial too.
So our next strategy is, it involves creating an emotional dictionary. And this, we're just giving you the stuff to make it because we want to make sure that it's really individual to each person, and that each word that's in it really resonates with you. So this is a strategy that I've kind of called naming emotions. I don't know if that's the technical term for it, but...
Oh, it's definitely, I think it's technical.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so the idea is that you can kind of, name your emotions so that it's more specific to, and more detailed to just a very general definition. That didn't make any sense, did it?
No, or a general word sadness or anger.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. So sadness, anger, anxious, happy, those are 4 very general, broad emotional categories, I would call them. They're not necessarily specific emotions, they're more like categories. So if you can kind of delve into, so if you're feeling sad, if you can kind of delve into that and figure out some more specific, more detailed words that describe how you're feeling, then it can really help you to try and figure out, okay, why am I feeling this way? Because, maybe you say at first, I'm feeling sad. But when you start delving deeper into it, maybe what you're actually feeling is lonely. And that's very different than feeling sad. And that's, it's a very different approach to how you would deal with that sadness if you're actually feeling lonely.
Yeah, I know. I think that's fantastic, and just some tips for use. Actually, what you were talking about, just to kind of build on that with emotional dictionary and kind of expanding that vocabulary is going to help you to bring more nuance and context to your emotions. And I love the example you gave of, sadness, but it's actually loneliness. That's going to help you to target your response, right? Okay, so I'm feeling lonely, and what am I going to do in response to that? I'm going to reach out to a friend, I'm going to join a special interest group, I'm going to cuddle with my cat, whatever it might be, it's going to help you to target that emotion a bit more. And so I think that's the great thing about expanding your emotional vocabulary.
So if you can figure out the underlying sort of emotions that are more specific to these broad general categories, then it's a lot easier to figure out where that emotion is coming from.
One of the tips that I kind of had for this one is, when you're building your emotional dictionary, take time to reflect on, when have you felt that emotion in the past? What were some triggers for that emotion in particular? Again, ask yourself those experience questions. What was I thinking? What was I physically feeling? How did I behave when I felt this emotion? And that actually is going to help you to recognize it again in the future, and to kind of just be more aware of, okay, what's my kind of holistic experience of this emotion in my thoughts, in my body, in my behavior. So I think that's a great way to, as you're building the dictionary, reflect on each of them and what it means for you, what it looks like for you specifically. One of the most important things to remember about emotions is they aren't inherently good or bad, or negative or positive. it's good to experience, I use the word good, but it's important to actually give yourself permission to experience a broad range of emotions. And yes, some emotions are much more uncomfortable than others, but in kind of giving yourself that permission and acceptance of emotions, it actually helps you to process them a bit better. And for an example, anger, some cultures are really socialized not to express anger, and some theories would say that internalized anger can contribute to depression. So by kind of giving yourself that permission and actually accepting it and expressing it, it's really healthy. So that's kind of one tip I have, or kind of just wanting people to know, don't label emotions good or bad. We need to experience all different types of emotions, and that's a normal part of human experience.
Yeah. So we're naming the emotions, but we're not judging them.
Yes, I love that non-judgmental approach. I think, again, as we kind of said with the mood tracking, just be really aware of warnings or triggers. So, for example, if you're reflecting on emotions and building your dictionary, and you say, I feel really disappointed today, I feel so lonely, I feel so hopeless, and you're going through those words, and you start to kind of maybe spiral, like I'm always going to feel this way, or I just feel so dark and hopeless today. Make sure you reach out and get help, right? Or take a break, take a step back from that, because it can be really heavy to process emotions. Yeah. Especially, we kind of use that example of anger. Anger tends to be a secondary emotion. There's often a lot going on under the surface. And if you've never taken the time to, or, had the tools to evaluate what is that anger at a deeper level, for example, shame can often underlie anger. Yeah. So that can be really overwhelming. So just make sure you take a break or reach out for help if it's too much. Yeah. And then another thing I would share is that just remember, feelings are not facts. So that's actually a common cognitive distortion with anxiety, with depression, is that your feelings do not always reflect the reality that's going on. So, for example, if you are feeling disappointed about a result on a test, that doesn't mean you're a disappointment. So just make sure you remember that. Yes, our emotions are valid, but that doesn't always mean that is what's going on, from other people's perspectives, or what's reality.
Or what it's going to feel like in the future.
Exactly, yeah. It's a state, not a kind of forever thing.
I guess I also wanted to bring up how when you're naming your emotions, one of the things that I think research has found is that when you're able to name your emotions, it kind of helps you feel them less intensely. It kind of puts a little bit of distance between them. So if you're feeling like just really uncomfortable and you name that emotion, like let's use loneliness again. Maybe you're feeling lonely. When you can name that emotion, it might actually get rid of a little bit of the discomfort. It's not going to make the emotion go away, but but it can kind of help create some distance between that emotion and yourself.
When you know what's going on, I think there's less confusion as well, and as we kind of talked about before, it gives you more hope of, okay, now I know how to respond to this because I know what it is, and maybe I also am beginning to build some insight into what's causing this emotion, or what's a trigger for this emotion.
Okay, so let's talk about this last one then. So we wanted our subscribers to try out using affirmation statements. So affirmation statements are little, I guess, positive quotes or sayings that you repeat to yourself on a regular basis in hopes of kind of reprogramming your brain. So especially if you're somebody that has depression or anxiety, you can sometimes have these subconscious phrases or beliefs about yourself or about your surroundings. Like maybe something that you don't even realize that you're repeating to yourself over and over again is like, I'm worthless. And if you're saying that to yourself over and over and over again, you're gonna believe it, for one, but also it's gonna become a part of your brain's programming. So with positive affirmations, if you're, instead of saying something like I am worthless, if you're very intentionally saying something like I am enough, for example, that's one of my favorites. So if you are saying I am enough over and over and over again, you know, like you have it taped to your mirror and you have it in a note on your phone, and maybe if you like meditating, that's something that you meditate on, you say that phrase several times. Or when you're feeling really anxious, you sort of, you know, bring out that phrase because it's something that resonates with you. Then the idea is that hopefully eventually this affirmation will become almost subconscious. So instead of your brain automatically saying I am worthless, maybe it'll automatically say I am enough.
I think affirmations and just positive, realistic self-talk is...
Realistic is the
Yes,
important one.
yes, exactly, is such an important part of wellness. And you know, a lot of this fits within a cognitive behavioral,
Yes,
you know,
it is
therapy
really similar
approach.
to CBT.
Yeah, and one of the important things is recognizing that our thoughts have a lot of influence over our emotions and our behaviors. And so just building this habit of healthy, positive, realistic self-talk and affirmative statements actually can really help you to build healthy thinking patterns. And that's a really great thing to do. So I think that's one of the benefits of affirmations. And you know, when we kind of think about those unhealthy thinking patterns, one common one that you see with anxiety and depression is mental filtering. So only paying attention to the negative and kind of letting, it's like a filter, kind of letting the positive slide through and just catching the negative. And affirmations help to challenge that because you're purposely focusing on the positive and you right? And so I think that's a really important part of affirmations.
And hopefully with practice, that brain filter will stop, you know, letting the positive one slide through. Maybe it'll let the negative one slide through instead, because it's about reprogramming your brain,
Absolutely.
right? And sort of trying to make yourself subconsciously do this. So right now it might have to be very conscious, but hopefully with practice it'll start just coming automatically.
Maybe I'll share a few tips
Yes,
about you know, how to do affirmations. So one of the things that I love so much is saying affirmations in second or third person. And research has actually shown that second and third person self-talk is more powerful than using like first person, because it gives a bit of psychological distance, and it's been shown to improve performance on tests, confidence, things like that. So it's really great for that. So kind of an example would be using either, you know, second person language, so like your you know, pronouns like you, or like you can do this, or even third person, so talking to yourself and using your name. So kind of an example, instead of reading from the affirmation and saying I can cope with panic, you would change it to Stephanie, you can cope with panic today. So just really personalizing it and using that language can be a really powerful tip. I think another thing I really encourage people to do is make the affirmation your own and expand on it. So use evidence. That's always something I tell people to use. Use evidence. So what are the ways that affirmation is true for you? When are times that that's been true in the past? So an example would be if there's an affirmation of you can cope with panic, you know, you would first of all use second or third person language. So Stephanie, you can cope with panic today. You have the tools to do that. You can do deep breathing, you can do progressive muscle relaxation, you have your friend's phone that you can text. You know, you have all these tools, and you coped with that panic episode last week like a champ. You can do this. So just really personalizing it and expanding on it can make the affirmation even more powerful.
And do you have any warnings?
Not a lot for this one. I think just really try to engage in the affirmation. You know, if you just kind of read it and just, you know, read it silently to yourself and don't really apply it to you, it's probably not going to be as effective. You do have to engage on it in a personal level. Like I said, use second and third person language. Say it out loud. Write it in multiple places, in multiple ways. You know, really carry it with you. I think that's where you're going to see the most benefit. And with all of the things that we've talked about today, because they are, a lot of them fit within cognitive behavioral therapy, it's so important that you are reprogramming your brain through this, and that takes time. So just knowing that this isn't going to be an instant change. It's going to take at least a month, I would say. You know, at least a month, and that's like that's the very shortest amount of time. It's going to take time, and not every tool is going to work for every person. But just trying them and seeing
giving
is this
them a fair
good fit?
chance.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
giving them a fair chance, trying your best, and not giving up. If it isn't something that works for you, there are so many more tools that you can try. There's so many more things that you can do. So yeah, like you said, it's not going to be an overnight fix, but you know, the more things you try, the closer you are to finding something that works for you. Anything else that you wanted to add?
I don't
Anything
think
else
so.
you think of?
No, I think we've
That's
gone
all
through
of them.
everything.
Yay!
Yay!
I think I actually forgot to add the disclaimer at the very beginning.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Disclaimer: this is not medical advice. Please keep seeing your counselor. You know, you are a mental health professional. But we don't know your personal stories, and you know, there's nothing that can really replace one-on-one therapy with somebody.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, this is just one more tool for the toolbox, but making sure that you are checking in if you have a mental health professional, you know, checking in with them and keeping that up, I think is important. And as you kind of said, it's not a replacement, it's a piece of the puzzle.
It's an additional resource. Okay, well, thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge with us today. We really appreciate it. And I say we because I'm talking for my subscribers, but I'm sure they do.
Yeah, it was my pleasure,
Yeah.
and I hope everyone enjoys the box and you know, finds benefit from the different tools that Shawn has included this month.
Yeah, me too. And Steph's going to be back again next month to talk about our next theme, which is a surprise. So, so you get to see her again.
Yay.
So, yeah, I hope this box does wonders for people. You know, just do your best, keep practicing. And I don't know, we'll see you next time. Like, I feel like I'm in a kid's show
Maybe
now.
we need like a tagline.
Yeah, we need a tagline.
Yeah. So good.
It's like a super awkward ending, but you know what?
You can edit it all out.
Yeah, just edit out like the vast majority of that ending.
I know.